Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're doing part 166 of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and use them to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today we've got quite an interesting assortment. We've got an orangutan, finally. Nice to see a real good mod orangutan. We've also got a couple of Scots, habitat species, a couple of really interesting, obscure animals, and we've got an extinct one too, so really excited to get stuck into these. So first off, we're going to be starting off by Scott, who made the first three mods here, the first three exhibit ones. We're going to have a look at the Tanzanian blue ring centipede. So let's have a look at these guys. So look, well, perfect. He's on a perfect rock, being able to pose perfectly for us. So this is the species, or genus name, Ethystygmus trigonpodus. So this is a species of centipede from this family Scolopendridae, which includes most common species of centipede. They go by a number of common names, but they're also called the African giant centipede or the Tanzanian blue ring centipede. So they are also get to about 18 centimeters long, which is quite big. Not the biggest of all centipedes, but still quite a big centipede. And they are common in northern parts of Nigeria, and actually reach sexual maturity within a year, which is uncommon for most species of centipede. And there are two different subspecies. There is Trigonpodus, and Pygmeoides. So I guess that's just the subspecies. But yeah, really, really cool guys. And there's sadly not too much information on them on the internet, but we'll have a look at the Zoopedia, see if we can get anything more out of it. So yeah, they often are confused. Actually, when I was looking it up, I looked at Scolopendra mortansens, or what's this, the species. A lot more information on them, but it's not the correct species. Like other centipedes, they are nocturnal, so they search the undergrowth for prey, which ranges from insects to earthworms to amphibians and small mammals. Up to that, anything that can overpower is prey. So basically anything smaller than them. And individuals in northern parts of Nigeria can reach sexual maturity within 1 year, which is pretty interesting. And this genus, or the genus this guy belongs to, is widespread. It can be found in tropical and warm temperate regions of Africa, Asia, particularly Southeast Asia, and the Indian subcontinent, and Oceania, in particular Polynesia, Melanesia, and Australia. So yeah, pretty cool. And being an exhibit animal, they don't really fit in with anyone. So yeah, really, really cool guys. How can you not love them? I love the nice blue rings to their legs and everything. Really, really pretty animals. How can you not love them to bits? Anyway, we are going to carry on. And next one's also done by Scott. We have got the Israeli desert huntsman spider, a really, really cool and sadly potentially endangered species, which is a little bit sad. So let's get stuck into it. Let's see if we can find one in the light. Here we are, perfect. Look at you, aren't you adorable? So the scientific name for this species is Sobalus anavarensis, which is the Israeli desert huntsman spider. So these guys are a huntsman spider found in the southern Avara Valley of Israel and Jordan, and was first described by Gershom Levi by the Hebrew University of Jerusalem in 2007. The news agencies later reported it in 2010 as a new discovery, slightly different spelling, by a team of biologists of the University of Haifa. So this is a decent sized spider, has a leg span of about 14 centimeters, or about 5.5 inches, making it the largest member of the family Sparacidae in the Middle East. And males typically have a body length of about 1.85 to 2.40 centimeters, or 0.73 to 0.94 inches, while females are a little bit bigger with a body length of 2.20 to 2.65 centimeters, or 0.87 to 1.04 inches. So a little bit bigger, so only a big female will get over an inch in body length. So these guys have a very interesting habitat. So this species particularly lives in sand dunes or partially stable stands at the edge of salt marshes. And it is nocturnal and is most active in the more hot summer months. And it constructs underground dens with hinged trapdoors like a perculum made of sand and silk in order to disguise its entrance from predators. So it is effectively kind of a type of trapdoor spider, so which is quite interesting. But sadly, they are at risk of conservation. So the sands of Sanmar, which are the last remaining sand dunes in the southern Ava region in Israel, are home to the species, and they are sadly disappearing. So the sands, once covering as many as 7 kilometers squared, or 2.7 square miles, now cover less than 3 kilometers squared due to the rezoning for agriculture and sand quarries. And mining projects of the sand intend to be renewed in the near future, and thus the habitat is uncertain. So should these guys, that sand of sandbar be destroyed, it's unlikely that these guys would survive. So sadly, they could be on the extinct list very soon, unless some good protections are put in place so we can have these guys in the long future. And I know a lot of people don't like spiders, these gross spiders, but I think they deserve a bit of love too. They are pretty great animals, and especially a cool species like that. How can they not look amazing? Anyway, that's another Scott one. We've got another Scott one as well here. Last but certainly not least, has he got everything in there he needs? Yes, he does. So we have gotten here these red salamander. So let's have a look at these guys. So you can find one hanging out on a log or something that's nice to look at. Look how cute they are. Look at this little cutie right here. So this is the red salamander. So the red salamander, or Pseudotriton ruber, these guys are a species of salamander in the family Pterodontidae, or the lungless salamanders, endemic to the eastern United States. Their skin is typically orange-red with random spots, typically. And they are a medium-sized salamander, with adults reaching from 4.3 to 7.1 inches, or about 11 to 18 centimeters in total length. They have relatively stout bodies with 16 to 18 coastal grooved sides, and at its back it varies from an orange-brownish tint to a bright red depending on its age, and often older salamanders will have duller colours than younger salamanders. The larvae of this species have a stout head and body, dark in coloration, lack spots, and tend to have distinct moltings or streaks. And another distinguishing characteristic is the number of irregular black spots down its back. And although the red salamander is brightly coloured and has many distinguishing features, it can be hard to tell apart the species from the closely related mud salamander, but can be distinguished by the colour of its iris, with both Montanus having red colours, but which is thought to be mimicking, like saying, hey, I'm poisonous, don't mess with me, as I'll get into. The red salamander has more spots on the, and also tends to be larger in size than those in the mud salamander. In regards to eye colour, the iris is kind of in the red salamander is a gold-like tint, while the iris in these guys is brown. So there's pretty minor ways to tell them apart, but you can. Also, mud salamanders typically have blunter snouts than red salamanders, and typically have contrasting dorsal and ventral coloration, while these guys tend to be much more uniform in colour, so that's another way to tell them apart from a mud salamander, if you're ever in the eastern US trying to look for salamanders and trying to identify them. So in terms of its taxonomy, they are in the family Pterodae, which are the lungless salamanders, which, as we mentioned, don't have lungs. They usually breathe through their skin or linings in their mouths. Lungless in this family is thought to be evolved as an adaptation to live in streams, and the members of this family probably did evolve other methods for respiration other than gills due to the enhanced survival of larval salamanders in fast-moving environments, and stream environments in southern Appalachia. Lungs, in general, help aquatic animals maintain their position in the water column, but because these guys are benthic creatures, or like to hang around the bottom of waterways, they actually would have not have benefited them, because that would just hold air and make them float. So this allows them to be more buoyant and hang out at the bottom of the water. And the red salamander is further classed as a member of the genus Pseudotriton, and members include only the mud and red salamander, which we mentioned before. There are 4 different subspecies of the red salamander that occur across the eastern United States, occurring from streams through open areas such as fields and meadows, or deciduous or mixed hardwood forests, especially near streams and damp settings. They can also be found in these, and each subspecies is similar in appearance with slight differences. The dominant subspecies, the northern red salamander, is characterized as being red or reddish-orange with numerous black spots down its back. This subspecies can be found from southern New York to Ohio and northeast Alabama, as well as the upper peninsula of Michigan. Similar to appearance is the northern red salamander is the Blue Ridge red salamander, or Niditius, which is the subspecies name. This is slightly smaller and lacks the black coloration on the tip of its chin. The blue ridge salamander can be found in elevations more than 5,000 feet, or around 1,500 meters, in the southern parts of the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. The black chin red salamander differs in appearance by having strong black coloration under its chin, as well as spotting all the way up to the tip of its tail. So this guy doesn't quite have. This is most likely the dominant subspecies. and can be found at elevations more than 5,000 or 1,500 feet in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And the southern red salamander, or Vioscati, is often purplish to salmon coloured and normally has white spots on its head as well. And the subspecies can be found from South Carolina to southeast Louisiana and southwest Kentucky. And all subspecies of the red salamander tend to prefer moist environments, such as under moss or stones, near clean water sources. And they're normally found near large streams, but often will instead not often found near large streams, but in like smaller water sources. In terms of their ecology, some important aquatic and terrestrial aspects are of these guys, and they have very interesting microclimate preferences. Larval diet shows they shown to like the families, or shown to consist of Chimodidae and Cepheridae, as well as terrestrial prey and other salamanders. So these guys will eat other salamanders. Larval growth differs depending on the temperature of the water, and tends to be higher in the warm months when the water temperature is higher. The red salamander generally lays eggs in the fall, and hatching takes place in late fall and winter. The larval period lasts between 27 and 31 months, and then they metamorphosize. That takes place in the spring or early summer of their third year of life. The larval stage go through a metamorphosis at a few weeks or months, depending on environmental conditions. And larval red salamanders tend to be generalists, eating what they can. Those rates typically increase when water temperature is low, and large individuals feed more than small individuals. Although feeding rates appear to be to increase with size, mortality rate seems to be independent, and they seem to be at about 50% per year. So half will make it, half won't. The longer larval period ensures that the transformation is that the salamander is much larger than other species of salamander, and typically have a short juvenile period, maturing quickly. So this allows them to pretty much be bigger right out the gate and, be that kind of top predator in their ecosystem. In their habitat. Larval duration and size of metamorphosis decreases with increasing elevation, and males mature at between 53 and 63 millimeters, or about 2.5 to 2.1 to 2.5 inches at about 4 years of age, and females will mature at 55 to 68 millimeters, or 2.2 to 2.7 inches at about 5 years of age. So females take a little bit slower to grow and get bigger and mature because they've got to carry around those eggs. Red salamanders typically live in springs or streams during the winter, and then disperse from these sites in fall and spring. And due to their semi-aquatic nature, they do remain in terrestrial environments until early spring, and then they move to more aquatic sites to breed. Adults will often live in burrows along streams and other moist environments, such as under logs or rocks, with adults being generalists and pretty much feeding on whatever they can, such as earthworms, slugs, snails, spiders, diving beetles, and other invertebrates, as well as small amphibians that include the redback salamander. So that's interesting as well. But the predators themselves can be small carnivores, such as skunks and raccoons. And since the red salamander is a large species, its presence or absence can greatly affect its ecosystem where it lives, and the understanding of its ecology is quite important about understanding the local communities of animals, which is quite cool. So this species has a wide range during its breeding season, which is only limited by extremely cold temperatures. Adults are known to migrate from streams and bodies of water to terrestrial habitats during the specific seasons of the year, and they will return from aquatic streams in the late summer and early fall to begin breeding. Generally, however, adult red salamanders mate annually and engage in primitive courted activities where the male will kind of approach the female, rubbing his snout against hers and her snout, cheek, and chin. Then the male will move his head up and body up into her chin and start undulating his tail. The female then straddles the male's tail, and the pair engage in a straddled walk until the male deposits the sperm on the substrate. And then the saddle walk lasts about 2 minutes, and once the sperm is deposited, the female will pick it up and then she'll move on. One interesting as well is females are capable of long-term storage and may not lay eggs for months after mating. Females will typically lay eggs in the fall or early winter in headward streams and have well-hidden nests, and these eggs will usually be laid on clusters and cling to submerged plants or other objects. And based on the presence of scars and hypertrophied jaws in mature males seem to engage in mate guarding behavior. And males will often occasionally court other males to kind of, make sure they're spent and they can't deposit spermatophores and get a better chance of their own. One important behavioral aspect as well, they have defense mechanisms. So when threatened, they will assume a defensive posture where they curl up their bodies and elevate and extend their rears and place their head under their tails, which are elevated, undulating from side to side. The coloration of the red salamander has been hypothesized to mimic the red F stage of the eastern newt, which emits a powerful neurotoxin. And this phenomenon is known as Müllerian mimicry complex. However, this hypothesis is highly criticized due to the size differences in the organisms and the differences they spend foraging, with ruba at night and the red F foraging during the day. Though more recently, they have been noted to have reduced palatability, so they are considered part of their Müllerian mimicry system, as all species are unpalatable and benefit from this aposematic coloring. So basically, being bright colors, signaling to predators, hey, I don't taste that good, don't eat me please, I'm poisonous. That's the simplest way to put it. But in human trials, subjects actually reported no repulsive taste or noxious taste to red salamanders, though these guys do produce pseudo-triton toxin that has a first effects on mice, with hypertension in hind legs and lower back, irritability, hypothermia, coma, and death within 12 to 48 hours. In mice, let me be clear, not in people. But overall, luckily this species is doing okay. They're common and widespread, though locally they have declined because of habitat loss, and they are listed an endangered species in Indiana. And they are arguably one of the most primitive species of lugless salamanders, so they are quite important to understanding the evolution of these kind of lungless salamanders, and maintaining species diversity is always quite important in any conservation project. So to preventing the loss of salamander diversity as a whole, it is important to have some management plan in place to protect them as well. And because they require relatively pure streams, it's important to monitor their habitats for human waste and pollution, since debris and silt could have adverse impacts on their habitat and could potentially risk their survival. So one of those things is going to be quite important. But yeah, quite cute. Look at a cute little guy. How can you not love him? Really, really cute. So yeah, there's red salamander, that's done. So these guys are all done by Scott, who always does an awesome job. So next up, we have got by yellow pangolin. We have got the Tasmanian Pademelon. So a really, really cute guy. So let's have a look. So this is Tasmanian Palamena, or Thylogale belliandi. These guys are also known as the rufous-bellied pademelon or red-bellied pademelon. And the subspecies of pademelon found in Tasmania, though they were formerly found across southeastern Australia. And this pademelon has developed heavier and bushier fur than its northern relatives, which live in northern Australia and Papua New Guinea. And the species, the scientific name honours J.J.H. La Bellanada, who actually collected the first specimen on an expedition, who was on Van Diemen's Land in 1792, and there is no recognised subspecies, so it's only the Tasmanian Pademelon species. So these guys, as you can see, have got quite a compact body with short rounded ears, thick fur over its limbs, head and body, and a tail covered in quite short hairs. It typically has greyish fur over most of its body, but you can see it's got kind of yellowish or rufous parts. You can see like around the ears, and at the bottom as well, a little bit yellowish around their underbody. But they do not, unlike most other palamelons, have like a face or hip marking, so they're not like that typically characteristic. And they get to decent size, so male pademelons can reach about 6.5 kilograms, or about 14 pounds in weight, 70 to 120 centimeters long, or 28 to 47 inches in length, including a 30 to 45 centimeter, 12 to 18 feet tail, and are considerably larger than females, who average about 4.6 kilograms, or about 10 pounds, so males can get about 4 pounds heavier. In terms of their distribution, I mentioned that they are from Tasmania. That's what they kind of say, the Tasmanian Pademelon. It's kind of in the name. And they're quite widespread across mainland Tasmania, though they have been found also as well in the nearby King and Furex's Islands. They were sadly also extirpated from the Australian mainland in the 19th century, so I really hope there's some efforts like the Tasmanian Devil to reintroduce pademelons, back to southern Australia. Rainforest, sclerophyll forests, and scrubland are preferred, but they will also live in dry open eucalyptus forests as well. Such places, though, next to open areas where they can feed, are kind of preferred, so they can, hang out there. Just gonna have a look there. Look at how cute they are. Anyway, so the diet and ecology, these guys are a herbivore. They feed on a wide variety of plants, from herbs to green shoots and grasses, and sometimes even nectar-bearing flowers. And they are quite an important animal in the ecosystem. They were once prey for the thylacine. These guys are still preyed upon by animals such as Tasmanian devils, quolls, and eagles, as well as feral cats and dogs. And even though they are still quite abundant to even the point where they are culled, occasionally along with other wallaby species, to avoid competition with farm animals. And hunting of the Tasmanian Pademelon is allowed. Its pelt does have some economic value, and they can meat is valuable, so you can eat it. So I really hope they do take some of those culled animals that are animals supposed to be culled, take them to Australia, because why not? They need, I love a bit of rewilding. It's the goal there. So in terms of their behavior, these guys are solitary and nocturnal. They spend their daylight hours in thick vegetation. After dusk, the animals will move onto open areas to feed, but really stay more than 100 meters from the forage edge. Adults have been recorded making growling sounds during aggressive interactions and clucking noises at other times, such as when a mother is calling their young or males are pursuing females. They've also been reported to engage in grass-pulling behavior, possibly a visual signal to other members of the species, and it involves standing upright, pulling up clumps of grass and throwing them against their chests. And males, very similar to other species of kangaroo, will engage in ritualistic bouts where they kind of combat and fight each other and determine dominance, where they will box and kick each other. Very similar to other species of kangaroos. Both species as well groom themselves by scratching their heads and shoulders with the hind feet in for up to 10 minutes, and the mothers also groom the young for a brief time once they first emerge from their pouch. So really, really cute. We'll have a look at the cute little babies while we talk about their reproduction, because always very interesting talking about marsupial reproduction. Look at this cute little guy. So in terms of reproduction, there is no specific breeding season, but most pademelons births occur in the autumn, with males regularly sniff the females within the range and then will pursue them if they're active, reproductive, or receptive, where they remain for only 24 hours at a time. Copulation can be lengthy though, and consisting of several bouts, and the animals resting up to 15 minutes between each session. Gestation itself lasts about 30 days, with the young measuring about 16 millimeters or 0.63 inches in length at birth, and then they rapidly move towards the pouch, where they attach to one of 4 teats. Then they grow relatively slowly compared to other marsupial species of their size, opening their eyes at weeks 18 to 20, and first developing fur between 20 and 22 weeks. They are fully furred at about 160 days, at which point they begin to poke their head out the pouch, and the first full emergence from the pouch can occur from this time up to about 190 days of age, although they continue to suckle for another 3 months. Which the mother becomes actually aggressive towards them. And the mother will often give birth to a second joey while nursing an older one that has already left the pouch. And typically they'll have 1.3 babies per year, so 1 to maybe 2 babies a year. Joeys typically become sexually mature at 17 months for males and 13 for females. And lifespan as the wild is unknown, but typically could live up to about 5 to 6 years. So not super long-lived, but still decent for an animal like that. But yeah, really, really cute. How can you not love these guys? And that's not what I wanted to do. I want to have a look at the Pademelon. So look at these cute little guys right here. Look at this little cutie. Having a good time. So, next up, we have got another one done by Yellow Pangolin. We have got the East Caucasian Tur, or the Dashan Tur, I believe you say that. So let's have a look at these guys. Or Dashanti Tur. These guys are quite cool. So these guys are goat-like animals, you can see. They're a type of goat, or caprine. They have large but narrow bodies with stout legs and show quite significant sexual dimorphism. So we have a look at the male right now. Males will stand, especially adult males, will stand about 105 centimeters or 41 inches tall at the shoulder and measure 190 centimeters or 75 inches in length and from head to body length, and weigh about 140 kilograms or 310 pounds. The equivalent figures for adult females about 85 centimeters, 33 inches in shoulder height, 138 centimeters or 54 inches in head to body length, and about 56 kilograms, 132 pounds in weight. And you can see males have much more impressive horns. They typically have horns that are 70 to 90 centimeters, or about 28 to 35 inches in length, while females typically only have 20 to 22 centimeter horns that are about 7.9 to 8.7 inches in total length. So you can see these quite cool guys there. We'll have a look at the female now, because we're got to get a chance to get a good look at her. So, in terms of their summer coat, they can be like short and sandy yellow with dirty white underparts, although dark brown stripes can also occur on the front surface of the legs and upper surface of the tail. But in the winter, the coats of females and juvenile males will actually become slightly greyish in colour, but otherwise remain similar. But however, the winter coats of adult males are a solid dark brown without any visual striping on the legs at all. Males will then also develop a beard with their winter coats in their second year, reaching a full length of about 12 centimeters or 4.7 inches by their fourth or fifth year. And compared to other goats, the beards of East Caucasian terns are actually relatively stiff and project somewhat forwards, rather than just drooping down. And these beards are small or entirely absent in females and in males in their summer coats, so they typically grow them back every winter. So the habitats of these guys, they occur in the Greater Caucasus Mountains between 800 to 4,000 meters, or between 2,600 to 13,000 feet, roughly extending to Mount Shahara in Georgia, down to Mount Bardang in Azerbaijan to the east. And the western edge of the Caucasus of the East Caucasian tur remains unclear, as it overlaps with the West Caucasian tur. But most of the species of the population tend to avoid human disturbances or otherwise occur in extremely rugged open terrain across above 300,000 meters. Though in areas with little to no human disturbance, they do occur in gentler and much lower terrain. So let's look at the babies, talk about reproduction. So the baby breeding occurs from late November to early January, with births taking place May to June. And typically after gestation of 160 to 165 days, newborn turs weigh between 3.4 to 4.1 kilograms, or 7.5 to 9 pounds, and are usually singletons, although 3% of pregnancies can be twin births. Young turs are also extremely agile, being able to scamper across steep slopes after only about a day of life. And they generally start sampling grasses after 1 month, but continue to suckle until December. Growth is also relatively slow, and they do not reach their full adult size for 5 years, and males at around 10 to 11 years of age. So females will reach sexual maturity about 2 years, but don't actually breed until 4, so typically there is a little bit of a delay there. But yeah, they're quite slow growing compared to a lot of animals. In terms of their diet, we'll have a look at the male while we talk about their diet. Let's see, because it's been interesting. So in terms of their diet, during the warm months, feeding occurs at intervals throughout the late afternoon, night, and morning, with the hottest hours of the day being spent resting in warm, sheltered places. And though in winter they may remain in open pastures throughout the day, grazing and resting and alternating from that. Daily movements may cover 15 to 20 kilometers, or about 9 to 12 miles per day. And they eat almost every kind of vegetation, but prefer forbs in springs and summer, and grasses, trees, and shrubs in autumn and winter. Their seasonal migrations cover a vertical distance between 15,000 to 2,000 meters, or between 4,900 and 6,600 feet, with an upward thrust in May and a return downward in October. And the adults generally inhabit higher altitudes than females, and the young descending to join them during the breeding season. During the summer, though, the turs also make daily migrations as much as 1,000 meters or 3,300 feet between feeding meadows and nighttime resting spots. During the rut as well, vigorous competition will arise for males for mating rights. Older males are dominant over younger ones, which also drive the female away from females using threatening postures. Rutting and occasionally will clash with each other, but fights between equally sized males can be more fierce, beginning with both animals rearing on the hindlings and butting each other before vigorously horn wrestling that often results in the combatants rolling down steep slopes until one submits and leads the group. During the rut, though, males will mark their territory as well by debarking and scent marking trees, which is quite interesting as well. Also by heavy branches too. And a nice scratch there. But outside the rutting season, females will live in stable groups of up to 7 individuals, would often include a few juvenile males. Older males, though, would live in larger single-sex groups of up to 12 members, around 12 members, while some younger males will travel in groups of 2 to 3. These male groups break up around November, and rut begins, and mixing groups become the norm, reforming again in January or February, and in protected areas they can have a density between 5 and 16 animals per square kilometre, about 13 to 41 per square mile. So this shows how common they are. And luckily they are doing okay. They are considered near threatened, but there is some risks to that, of course. But yeah, really, really cool. And their scientific name is Capra cyclonicornis. So that's the way you tell them apart from the East Caucasian ter. But yeah, really, really cool. Another great mod by Yellow Pangolin. And next up, we've got a couple really awesome mods by Great Cakes Mods. So we're going to have a look at another extinct one here. A really, really cool. We've got a really cool extinct animal called Tylocephalonyx. So this is a really interesting species. So these guys, their scientific name means knob head hoof. So tylos means knob, head means cephalos, like cephalos, and hoof is onyx. So it's an extinct species of Calicothea, or Calicotheres were a really interesting group. So they were, which means gravel beast. They were a family of odd-toed ungulates, or perissodactyls, so they were related to things like horses, rhinos, and tapirs. They lived in North America, Eurasia, and Africa from the Middle Eocene to the early Pliocene, and are often called Calicotheres. And what really sets them apart is that they've got really interesting morphology. So they've almost got gorilla-like forelimbs and have claws for grabbing at vegetation. And they were thought to be browsers and foraging on fruits and bark and leaves and things like that. So that what really sets them apart are those claws, which makes them really interesting. So this species as well, what sets us apart from other species of Calicotheres is that they have a dome-like skull. As you can see, it's a feature found in some other species of Calithere, especially in their group, the Cisconotherine. But this is kind of the most developed in this species. So this is the one with the most developed, knob, you could say, or dome-shaped skull. Adequate fossil materials are lacking to whether both sexes had this knob, or it was sexually dimorphic, so potentially one sex had it and one didn't. Though there is evidence of sexual dimorphism within Calicotheres, and was common, so it could be reasonable to assume that it is only males, and typically males would use it, but we really just don't know. These guys may have used their dome in the same way pachycephalosaurs may have butted each other. But there is not really much evidence for pachycephalosaurs nor Tylocephalonyx to use their domes to crash into each other like high impacts similar to modern bighorn sheep, though there is a little bit of evidence for pachycephalosaurs doing that now. We do have a pretty good idea. Anyway, we know that they were, butting each other, at least, maybe not in the same way bighorn sheep would, running up to each other, but they would be hitting each other with their domes because of injuries that we've found on the bones and things like that. But such contests require special adaptations for these guys, to protect their brains and protect their spines from the impacts of these animals hitting each other. But there's not sure to have much of this evidence in Calicotheres, so it's very possible that these guys wouldn't have charged each other like a bighorn sheep would have. They would have may have either used their domes for visual display, or just bump into and hit each other, very much potentially how a giraffe or a carpy would do it, or something like that, and would have used those for those contests. But yeah, very interesting animal. Not other than the dome, not too dissimilar from other species of Calicotheres, especially more famous ones like Calicotherium and Silotherium and Meropus. So is it actually quite similar to Meropus, as these guys kind of have their foots, they didn't have the claws walking around like that. So that's quite interesting. Really, really cool. Definitely a big fan. So we're going to let them run off and do their thing, and we've got a last mod, also done by Great Cakes. This one's also done by Great Cakes. We've got a really, really cool one, which I'm excited to get stuck into. We have got the Sumatran orangutan. So let's have a look at these guys. You can see the male there. That's one of the males. Let's see if he'll go and have a climb with us. So look at how cool these guys are. So this is the Sumatran orangutan, or the species name Pongo abeli. So these guys are one of the 3 modern species of orangutan and are found only on the north island of the Indonesian island of Sumatra. They are rarer than the Bornean orangutan, but are more common than the recently identified species, the Tapanuli orangutan, which is also found in Sumatra. They have a common name based on 2 separate local words. Let's see, in climbing, look at how cute that is, a lot of the brachiation. So the orang means person and hutan means forest, which is derived from the Malay language, which means basically the forest person. So very, very interesting in that regard. So a large male orangutan like this gets to about 1.7 meters or 5'6", and while females are typically and about 90 kilograms, while females are smaller at about 90 centimeters or about 3 feet tall and about 45 kilograms. And the main way to kind of tell them apart from Bornean orangutans is these guys have thinner and longer faces, and the hair is also typically longer than those of Bornean orangutans and have a paler red color typically compared to Borneo, which is typically a little bit more what's the word I'd use? A little bit darker red color. A little bit of fact about evolution as well. We do have micro-wear from subfossils orangutans from Sumatra that shows that they had similar diets to modern orangutans, also modern Sumatran orangutans, which fed mainly on soft fruits. So, in terms of ecology, compared to Bornean orangutans, they are much more frugivores, and also eat a lot more insects than Bornean orangutans. They will, with preferred fruits being jackfruits and figs, but they'll also eat bird eggs and small vertebrates, really, as we'll get into. Sumatran orangutans will also spend far less time feeding on the inner barks of trees. Wild Sumatran orangutans have been shown to use tools as well. Orangutan will actually break off a tree branch, and that's about 1 foot long, snap off twigs and fray one end in each of its teeth, which is quite interesting, as we'll get into. So often they'll do that. And then they will use these sticks to dig into holes of termites, tree holes for termites, and also use a stick to poke into the bee's nest wall and move it around to catch honey. In addition as well, they have been using these tools to eat fruits. So the fruit of the Nesila tree ripens. Its hard, rugged husk actually softens until it falls apart. And the inside are the seeds that the orangutans like to eat, but they are surrounded by fiberglass-like hairs that are quite painful for them to eat. So what they do is tools that have been created. They use these sticks that may be longer or shorter depending on whether they're used for insects or fruits. And if a particular tool is considered useful, what they'll do is actually often save it and will create like toolboxes where they will use like a 5-inch stick to make sure that they've got, to strip its bark, and then will carefully collect the hairs with it, so they able to collect the hairs and, so they can eat the seeds safely. And once the fruit is safe, the ape will eat it using its stick and its fingers, and all those similar swamps can be found on Borneo. The Bornean orangutan has not been seen using these tools, so this is something only found in Sumatran orangutans. And also the NHNZ, or the New Zealand, or Natural History New Zealand Worldwide, which is a product house, which is quite cool. Filmed this orangutan for the show Wild Asia in the Realm of the Red Ape, and actually showed them using a simple tool, a twig, to pry food from different places. There was a sequence of animal using a large leaf as an umbrella to protect itself from the rain. And as well as being used for tools, these guys use trees for means of transportation. They're actually the heaviest mammal that can climb or travel by tree, which makes them particularly susceptible to changes in arboreal compliance. But to deal with this, they use slow motion, so they don't usually climb very fast like a gibbon would. They usually make sure to have multiple points of contact and move quite slowly through the trees. And orangutans have even been shown to utilize the compliance of vertical structures to lower the costs of motivation by swaying trees back and forth to help with that, moving slowly and using multiple supports to do better, adapt to that, which is quite interesting. We'll have a look at the darker colored one here, just for a bit of variation. One thing as well is that the Sumatran orangutan is much more arboreal than the Bornean cousin. That is believed to be because of the presence of predators like the Sumatran tiger, and they move through the trees using quadrinomous locomotion, but also brachiation, or semi-brachiation. So they will climb with their arms through the trees, like we see them brachiate here. As of 2017, it was believed to be about 3,846 remaining members of the Sumatran orangutan species, with the World Wildlife Fund for Nature carrying out attempts to protect the species and allow them to reproduce in a safe environment in captivity. However, this comes at a risk as their native behaviors in the wild. While in captivity, they are risked from the captivity effect, which means animals that are held in captivity for long periods of time will no longer know how to behave naturally, as they're provided with water and food and shelter. They don't have to deal with the challenges wild ones do. So if they're put in the wild, they don't necessarily have that chance of surviving. But there have been multiple attempts and successful attempts to take captive orangutans and actually, reintroduce them into the wild and teach them how to be wild orangs, and they do quite well. One thing that's really cool as well, they are quite social, so they have a repertoire of about 64 different gestures that have been used in orangutans and can be identified, 29 of which are thought to have a specific meaning that can be interpreted by other orangutans the majority of the time. 6 international meanings were also found. So there's like an affectionate play one, stop action, look at / take object, share food object, co-locomote, and move away. So they actually do not use sounds like a lot of the species of ape use for communication like we do. They actually use gestures, actually just use gestures, which is really interesting. It's like they use sign language all the time. And in 2024, there was a wild Sumatran orangutan whose name was Rakus, was actually observed in making a paste from tube Fibonura tritorca trees leaves for a facial wound, and actually treated it. So they're known to use medicine, which is really, really interesting. And we'll talk about the life cycle of an orangutan. So Sumatran orangutans typically have like 5 life stages that are characterized by different behavioral and physical characteristics, with orangutans weighing between 2 to 6 kilograms when born, and their first stage is infancy, so they last from about birth until they're about 2.5 years old. Typically is about 2 to 6 kilograms. An infant is also identified by light pigmentation zones, so we'll have a look at the baby. There's a baby climbing up there, so we'll have a look at him, because he's quite cute. So you can see they've got a much lighter face around the eyes and muzzle as compared to the darker, pigmentation. And they have long hairs as well that protrude from the face, as you can kind of see going on there. During this time, though, they're pretty much always carried by their mother as they travel, and they also sleep in their mother's nests. And once they get about 2.5 years old, they enter the juvenile, that's the best way to put it, the juvenile stage. So they reach the juvenile stage, which is between 2.5 to 5 years, and their orangutan will then weigh between 6 to 15 kilograms. And they do not look drastically different from young little infant orangutans. Though they still are mainly carried by their mother, they will often play with their peers and make small trips, to explore within the mother's vision. Towards the end of that stage, though, they'll actually stop sleeping in their mother's nest and then move to their own nest. And then about to the age of 5 to 8 years of age, they'll become an adolescent, where they start to weigh between 15 to 30 kilograms. And the light patches on their face will start to disappear, and their face becomes completely dark like an adult orangutan. And during this time, they'll still have the constant contact of their mother, yet they will form a stronger relationship with their peers. And they are still young and act with caution around unfamiliar parents, especially males. And then at 8 years of age, female orangutans are considered fully developed and begin to have offspring of their own. But males will then have another stage called subadulthood. So this stage for male orangutans lasts about 8 to about 13 to 15 years, and then they'll weigh between 30 to 50 kilograms. Their face is completely dark, and then they start to develop these really big cheek phalanges. Let's see if we can find the male flanges. So where's the male? We'll have a look over here. So you can see these really big, kind of cheek flanges here as what they'll start developing at this stage. And also their beards start to emerge as well, and the hair around their face shortens, and then instead of pointing outwards, their face will actually flatten across the skull. And this stage also marks sexual maturity in males, yet they are still socially undeveloped and often will avoid kind of hanging out with other males, especially adult males. And then finally, once they reach about 15 years of age, 13 to 15, they will become males will become adults. And then finally, they will be extremely large. They can be up to about 50 to 90 kilograms, so quite huge, guys. We'll have a look. Is that one of the girls there? Yeah, that's one of the girls. We'll have a look at the male because that's what we want to talk about. But yeah, they get that big size, and that's roughly the weight of a full-grown human on average. And they have a full-grown beard. You can see these fully developed cheek callosities and long hair. And these orangutans will reach full sexual and social maturity, and now only travel alone by themselves. So female orangutans typically live about 44 to 53 years in the wild, with males having a slightly longer lifespan between 47 and 58 years. Females are able to give birth up to about 53 years of age, based on studies of menopausal cycles, and then can be identified by both that can be considered healthy right up to the end of their lifespans, which can be identified such as regular abundance of hair growth and robust cheek pads. So in terms of its comparison to the Bornean orangutan, these guys are more social, with groups appearing to feed on mass amounts of fig trees on fruit. They also, the best way to describe the community is loose, so they show no spatial or spatial exclusivity. Groups will typically consist of female clusters and a preferred male mate. However, adult males will generally avoid contact with other adult males. If subadult males try to mate with a female, although mostly unsuccessful, because mature females are easily capable of fending subadult male orangutans off, as they prefer to mate with mature males. Though usually there is a specific male in a group the males will prefer, and males will sometimes have a delay of many years in the development because once they develop these secondary sexual characteristics like those big beards and those big flanges, going on there. As you can see, this is also a great example of bimaturism, where these guys, although fully flared adult males and the fuller unflared males are also kind of both capable of reproducing, but they will use different strategies to kind of reproduce. That's the best way to kind of say it. So the average interbirth period for a Sumatran orangutan is about 9.3 years, which is actually the longest in great apes, including the Bornean orangutan. And infant orangutans will stay close to their mother for up to about 3 years, and even after that they're still associated with their mothers, and both of these guys are likely to live several decades, with a longevity estimated to be more than 50 years, and the average first reproductive age for a male orangutan is about 15 years, so typically once they reach 15, that's the first time they'll have a baby, and there is no indication of menopause, so typically females will be able to have babies right until they pass away, pretty much. That's the best way to describe it. So, Noja, which is actually thought to be the world's oldest orangutan in captivity in the wild at the time of the death, died at Miami Metro Zoo at the age of 55. There's also Putan, an orangutan that's thought to be 62 years old at the time of her death, and makes her the oldest recorded orangutan. And the current oldest is a female that lives in the Hamburg Zoo named Bella, who's about 61 years old. So quite long-lived animals. In terms of their diet, though, these guys are primarily frugivores, so they will feed on large seeds and fruits, such as durians, licas, jackfruits, figs, and breadfruits. But insects make a huge part of their diet, and their most consumed types are ants, primarily of the genus Campanoctus, which includes about 4 different species. And their main diet can be broken up to 5 categories: fruit, insects, leaf material, bark, and other miscellaneous food items. Studies have showed that orangutans in the Kempang-Tebambe area of Indonesia eat over 92 different species of fruit, 13 kinds of leaves, 22 different sorts of other vegetable materials such as top sprouts, and the pseudobulbs of orchids. And insects included in their diets numbered at least 17 types, and occasionally soil from termite mounds was kind of ingested in small quantities. And when there's low ripe fruit availability, Sumatran orangutans will also eat the meat of the slow loris, which is a nocturnal primate. And water consumption of the orangutans is often ingested from natural bowls in trees that they live around. They've even drank water from their hair when rainfall is quite heavy. As we mentioned, meat eating has been seen really in some Sumatran orangutans, and they do not show a male bias in meat eating, with research suggesting that 9 cases of these guys eating Slaughteroses, with a maximum mean rate of adult orangutans, was an entire adult male. Slaughteroses 160 grams, and the infant about 142 grams. And no cases of these have been shown during a mast year, so they typically only do it when times are desperate, and this is kind of a fallback in, leaner seasons. And similarly, most parents, the orangutans will also share their kills with their infants. So they are good mums, of course, very good mums. So it's also in terms of their genomics as well. They have 48 chromosomes, and the Sumatran orangutan's genome was actually sequenced in 2011 based on a captive female named Susie. And following humans and chimpanzees, Sumatran orangutan has been the third extant hominid to have its genome sequenced, which is also quite cool. And the researchers also published Let's Complete copies of 10 wild orangutans, 5 from Borneo, 1 from Sumatra, and 5 from Sumatra. And it showed to be the genetic diversity of Bornean orangutans is actually lower than Sumatran ones, despite the fact the population of Bornean orangutans is much higher. So even though there's less Sumatran orangutans, they are more endangered. Their population has much higher genetic diversity, which is quite good. And this comparison showed that the two species are believed to have diverged about 400,000 years ago, which is more recently than was previously thought. And they've also gone through fewer genetic rearrangements than chimpanzees and humans, or the chimpanzee-human lineage has. So that's also quite interesting. So let's talk about the threats that this critically endangered great ape faces as we watch her sleep. Now we'll have a look at a different one as they sleep. Look at this cool guy here just hanging out. So Sumatrans encounter threats such as logging, wholesale conversion of their forest into oil plantations, and also the fragmentation of roads, with oil companies actually using this method of deforestation to reuse land for palm oil. And the land is taken from the forest where they live, and there's actually an assessment of forest loss in the 1990s concluded that it suggests that at least 1,000 orangutans were lost every year within the Shire ecosystem alone. And as of 2017, approximately 82.5% of the Sumatran orangutan population is actually strictly confined to the northmost tip of the island in the Aceh province. And they're rarely, if ever, seen south of the Simpang Kanan River on Sumatran's west side, or south of the Ashan River on the east side. The Pak Barat population is thought to be the only population predicted to be able to stay in orangutans in the long run, given the current effects of habitat displacement and human impact. And while poaching is generally not a huge problem for orangutans, occasional local hunting does depend on population size, and they have been hunted in North Sumatra as part of targets for food. And even though deliberate attempts to hunt orangutans are rare, locals such as the Batak people have been known to eat almost any vertebrates in the area, which includes, of course, orangutans. They do have backbones. And additionally, they have been treated as pests by Sumatran farmers that are becoming targets of elimination because they will damage and steal crops. But for commercial aspects, hunts for both dead and live specimens have been recorded for the demand of European and North American institutions like museums and zoos throughout the 20th century. But luckily, are doing a bit okay. Another really interesting fact about the anatomy of Sumatran orangutans, they've also developed a higher functioning cardiovascular system. However, with this development of hugely improved air sacs in their lungs, they've become much more prevalent to air satulus, has been more prevalent in orangutans, and is actually quite similar to the streptococcal infection or strep throat in humans. So basically, they get more affected by things like strep throat. And this bacterial infection has become incredibly common in captive orangutans due to their more in contact with humans that could have strep throat, so it's more common and more likely to happen. And at first, both strains are treated and cured by antibiotics with the rest, but there was actually a Sumatran orangutan in 2014 that was first to die of the species, and this remains the only known case. And there's already the question whether the known human cure for this strep throat was actually not ineffective in this case to try and treat it. So we really don't know what happened, but still very interesting. So in terms of their conservation status, as I've mentioned, They are only found in northern parts of Sumatra, and in the wild they only survive in the Narragawi Aceh Damotion, like all the northernmost tip of the island. They're once much more widespread and found much farther in the south in the 19th century, such as Jabani and Badang. And there are small populations in North Sumatra bordering kind of some areas in the Lake Toba forests. And a survey of the Lake Toba region actually found 2 inhabited areas in the Gunung Lesher National Park and the Butan Lawang Park. And there's Bukit Lawang is actually a jungle village 90 kilometers south of Medan and situated in the eastern side of the national park, where there was an orangutan sanctuary that was set up in the 1970s to try and rehabilitate orangutans captured from the logging industry. And these rangers were actually trained to train these orangutans, to teach them jungle skills to help them survive in the wild. It allowed them to reintegrate into the forest, and they also provided supplementary food from a feeding platform. However, though, within the last few years, supplementary feeding has ceased, and the orangutan rehabilitation program has been deemed a success, as these orangutans have been fully rehabilitated, and the jungle is now at saturation point, so the sanctuary no longer takes new orphaned orangutans. And they have been considered one of the top 25 most endangered species of primate in the world, and are considered as critically endangered, which is quite sad because they face these impressive threats, which is, of course, really tragic. We'll have a look at him because he's kind of walking on the logs there. So there have been surveys. There was a survey in March 2016 that suggested about 14,613 Sumatran orangutans were alive, doubling the populations. They believe, actually, which is interesting as well. We'll have a look at her. What's she doing? But a survey in 2004 suggested there's about 7,300 orangutans in wild. And the same study suggests there's about 20,552 square kilometer area occupied by these orangutans, which is only an approximate range of about 8,992 square kilometers that can permit permanent populations. But luckily, some of these populations are protected in the Gunung Lesher National Park, other in underprotected areas, so hopefully they become protected. And there have been typically 2 strategies to try and protect the Sumatran orangutan in the wild. As we mentioned, rehab and reintroducing ex-captive or displaced individuals by logging, so kind of releasing them into the wild, and then protecting the forest habitats that they live in and protecting them from threats such as hunting and deforestation, with the former being deemed much more cost-effective for maintaining wild populations, but comes with a longer timescale. And the latter approach is more important for long-term, survival of the species, which is like a duh, because, we need habitats for orangutans to live in, and we can't just keep sending out orangutans into habitats that can't support them, otherwise we'll just pretty much be killing them. And this type of conservation has actually been pursued by World Wildlife Fund and other organizations to protect pieces of national native forest to provide habitats for these orangutans and other endangered species like Sumatran elephants, Sumatran tigers, and all sorts of really interesting animals. In addition to that as well, there has actually been a new population in Bukit Tunapu National Park, which has actually been established because of the reintroduction of confiscated illegal pets. And this population is numbered at about 70 individuals and is reproducing. And however, it's been concluded that forest conservation costs 12 times less than reintroducing orangutans in the wild and conserves more biological diversity, because you're not just saving orangutans, you're saving the habitat, which has many different endangered species in there. Another really sad thing as well is that these guys have large home ranges and low population density, which complicates conservation efforts as well. And population densities are also dependent on the large degree of the abundance of fruits with soft pulps, and they'll also commune seasonally between lowland, intermediate, and upland regions, following the availability of fruit. And undisturbed forests with borders can support larger orangutan populations. So the fragmentation of forests across Sumatra is a big issue for these guys because it can break up their seasonal movement. And sadly, Sumatra does have currently one of the highest deforestation rates in the world, so that is a really, really big threat to these orangutans. So hopefully something can be done to help them. Don't support, palm oil, try and get everything palm oil free if you can, all that stuff. A lot of actually zoos in New Zealand do things like, talking about, try and buy things that have no palm oil and sustainable, things like that. So yeah, do your best to do that. That's probably the best way to help orangutans or donate to, organizations supporting them. But yeah, I think this is a really great place to end the video. A really awesome mod. I just love this orangutan. Nice to see an orangutan mod come around. And I really hope to see the Tapanuli orangutan. That'd be another great mod to see. Hope someone sees that. Nice to get a bit of variety there. So yeah, I think this is a great place to end the video. So I really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified of anything. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe. And bye-bye.